The first time I healed without knowing it. I don't remember the exact day someone called me a witch for the first time, but I do remember what I felt. It was a strange mix between shame and truth. Not because of the word, but because deep down I knew that something inside me had changed and I couldn't explain it. I didn't start with candles or rituals or inherited prayers. I started with something simpler, a hand on the chest and a pain that disappeared. It was with my mother. She had been feeling a strange tightness for days, as if it was hard for her to breathe. Medically, there was nothing. No lung sounds, no inflammation, no diagnosis, just a sensation like trapped sadness. One night I sat next to her in silence. I didn't say anything. I just placed my hand on her chest slowly, as if my body was telling me, here it is. I didn't think about curing her. I didn't use any technique. I just breathed with her. I tried to be present without judgment, without rushing, just there. And after a few minutes her tears began to fall slowly, as if they weren't from that day or that week, but from something much older. We didn't say much, but that night she slept deeply and the next day the weight was gone. The tightness too. She didn't tell me at first. I noticed it by how she walked, lighter, more centered. Days later, jokingly, she told me, "You should have been a witch, not an engineer." And there that word floated, witch. Not as an insult, not as a title, but as a sign. That was the first time something in me knew there was a way to heal without medicines, without tools, without words, just with presence, just with frequency, just with vibration. Of course, at that moment I didn't understand anything. I just knew it had worked. I didn't know what I did, I didn't know why, but I felt it. There was something real in what happened. And the most unsettling thing wasn't what I felt in her, but what I felt in me, as if that connection had cleansed me too. As if by accompanying her something old in me had also been released. Since then I began to observe more, to listen to bodies, not with my ears but with another part, one I didn't know how to use, but that was starting to awaken on its own. And that's how this began, not with a course, not with a book, but with a gesture, with a hand on the chest and total presence. The rest came later. If you take something away from this chapter, remember this. You don't need to know how to heal someone. You just need to be completely present. If today someone close to you is in pain, don't try to fix it. Just stay. Breathe with that person. Put your attention on their chest, on your chest, and don't say anything. Vibration isn't transmitted with words. It's transmitted with presence. The rest will come on its own. Chapter 2, the body was speaking, and I didn't understand it. For a long time I thought my body only spoke when it hurt, when something failed, when it prevented me from continuing as always. I didn't understand that the body also spoke in silence, in whispers, with small signals I ignored. Unexplained tingling, pressure in the chest for no reason, insomnia just the night before making a bad decision, tiredness without reason. I thought it was stress or simply age, but no. It was my body warning me long before things broke. It took me a while to realize because no one taught me to listen to it like that. They taught me to endure, to take something so it passes, to disconnect from the symptom instead of asking it what it wanted to tell me. But after that night with my mother, I began to pay more attention, not only to others but to myself, to what I felt when entering a room, to the change in body temperature when someone spoke, to the knot in my stomach when I ignored my intuition. It was as if the body already knew everything, before the mind, before language, before even emotion, as if it were the first receiver of vibration. And then I understood something that changed me inside. It wasn't that the body got sick on its own. It was that many times it had been holding everything in for too long. It held what I didn't say, what I didn't cry, what I didn't release. And that energy doesn't disappear. It transforms, it settles where it can, and if it's not released, it stagnates. And when it stagnates, it hurts. I came across a phrase by Candace Pert, a neuroscientist who studied the relationship between emotions and the body. She said, "Emotions are the molecules of experience, and they are stored in every cell, not in the mind. In every cell." That made me understand why sometimes, after a sincere conversation, the body felt lighter. Or why after swallowing something for years, my throat hurt, for no apparent reason. My body wasn't betraying me, it was speaking to me. It always had. I was the one who didn't know how to read it. Since then, I no longer rushed to silence the symptoms. I learned to stay with them, to sit with the pain without fear, to ask, "What are you trying to tell me?" And many times the answer came on its own, not as a voice, but as a feeling of relief from having been heard. And with that, many times the symptom disappeared, not by magic, but because the energy had finally found an outlet. What this chapter teaches you: your body is not an obstacle, it's a messenger. The next time you feel pain, discomfort, tension, instead of rushing to eliminate it, do this. Stop for a few seconds, breathe slowly, and ask yourself, what part of me hasn't been heard? You may not get an immediate answer, but just by asking the question, you're already opening space for awareness and release. The body always spoke. Now you decide if you listen to it. Chapter 3. They weren't emotions, it was poorly digested energy. For a long time I called emotions everything I felt: sadness, anger, anguish, guilt. But over time I discovered that many times what was happening to me wasn't a clear emotion, but an energetic accumulation that I didn't know how to digest. I didn't understand it in theory. I discovered it in practice, accompanying a friend in crisis. One of those where you can't breathe, where the crying has no words, only noise, tension, trembling. I didn't know what to do. I was just there without touching her at first, but feeling everything that was happening in her body as if it were mine. The anguish rose, then fell. Then came a wave of heat and finally silence, as if something had been released without having been explained. That night I wrote in my journal. They weren't emotions, it was energy that was looking for a way out. Much later, I read about this in the work of Barbara Brennan, scientist and energy healer, author of Hands of Light. She talks about how unexpressed emotions are stored as blockages in the subtle levels of the human energy field. She also explains that by not being recognized or released, those energies crystallize and begin to alter the natural flow of vibration in the body. And that was exactly what I had experienced. It wasn't just anguish, it was stagnant energy, poorly digested energy that had been trapped, waiting to be heard and released. Over time, I began to notice the same in myself. Pains that appeared without explanation, sudden anxiety, insomnia before a pending conversation, stiffness in the neck after having silenced something important. The body doesn't only react to the world, it reacts to what we don't express. As Gabor Mate, doctor and author of When the Body Says No, said, constant emotional repression is a silent form of self-aggression that over time takes its toll in the form of illness. And when I understood that, I could no longer ignore my sensations. Not everything was repressed emotion, but many times it was retained energy, trapped, looking for a way out. And I learned something important. You don't always need to understand. What you do need is to allow it to move. Guided exercise, gentle emotional release. Do this when you feel emotional tension, but don't know why. Sit in a quiet place. Close your eyes. Bring your attention to any part of your body where you feel discomfort. Don't try to name it, just observe it, like someone watching a cloud. Now breathe deeply 3 times, and as you do, imagine the air reaches that area. On the exhale, repeat in your mind, I see you. You can move. I don't need to understand you. Stay there for 3 more minutes, just breathing and observing, without forcing, without judging. Sometimes with just that, what seemed like emotion begins to loosen, because in the end it was just energy asking permission to flow. Chapter 4. The day I touched someone and they stopped hurting. It wasn't a planned act or a learned technique. It was just an instant, an impulse, something inside me that moved and asked me to do something simple, human, place my hand near the place that hurt. A co-worker was complaining about persistent shoulder pain. She had been like that for weeks, without rest, without improvement. Stress, she said, but I noticed it was something more. One day, during a break, she brought her hand to her shoulder, closed her eyes in pain and exhaled, frustrated. There's no pill that can take it away anymore. I didn't think about helping her or doing anything special. I just felt I should bring my hand closer without touching. Just let something in me do what it had to do. I closed my eyes and focused on feeling, not on thinking. I just concentrated on breathing and on the heat that began to form between my palm and her body. After a few seconds, I felt a kind of pulsation, as if something was coming out or unblocking, and without saying a word, I moved away. Minutes later, she looked at me with surprise. What did you do? I answered honestly. I don't know, but the pain was gone. Years later, I found an explanation, at least one that helped me understand some of what had happened. The HeartMath Institute discovered that the human heart emits an electromagnetic field that can affect others depending on our emotional state. If you're in coherence, calm, compassion, gratitude, your field literally harmonizes that of whoever is near you. As they say, your heart doesn't just beat. It also radiates emotional information. It wasn't magic, it was science. The energy my body emitted in a state of deep attention may have facilitated the release of pain, not because I was special, but because I was available. Since then, I began to notice more of those moments, how my intention could affect the other's state, not from force, but from clean presence. And I understood something essential. It wasn't me who healed. It was the person opening themselves to their own healing. I was just there as a bridge. What this chapter teaches you, we all emit a vibration. Your internal emotional state modifies the external energy field. The next time someone closes in pain or anxiety, don't try to fix it. Just do this. Close your eyes, regulate your breathing, and enter a state of calm. From there, place your hand near their body, without pressing, just with presence, without expectation, and stay breathing with that person for a few minutes. It may be that nothing visible happens or everything may happen, because sometimes the most powerful energy isn't given, it's allowed. Chapter 5. How I learned to read the body without touching it. At first, I didn't understand what it was that I felt. I just noticed a discomfort in my stomach when someone spoke, or a kind of pressure in my chest that wasn't mine, or a strange urge to move away, even though the person wasn't saying anything aggressive. For years, I thought it was social anxiety or simple discomfort, until one day I heard someone say, "Your body feels energy before your mind understands it." And everything changed. I began to observe without wanting to be right, without trying to get anything right, just feel. And when I did, things started to happen. I approached someone in pain and felt heat in a part of my body that later coincided with the area where that person was blocked. Sometimes the other person's body didn't move, but I felt a tension as if an invisible part was speaking to me. It was then that I read Rupert Sheldrake, English biologist, author of The Theory of Morphic Fields. He argued that we are all connected by a non-visible field of information, and that this field contains patterns of behavior, memory, and emotions shared even between generations. That helped me understand that I wasn't imagining things. I was beginning to perceive a language that was always there, only no one taught me to read it. So over time I discovered that I didn't need to touch anyone to perceive their state or ask. Just observe the rhythm of their breathing, the way they held their body, how they entered a room, and above all, how I felt in their presence. Because sometimes the other's body speaks through yours. I understood that reading a field isn't controlling or guessing. It's allowing information to reveal itself while you learn to be without intervening. And that is a type of presence that requires practice, because we're not used to listening without doing, to feeling without needing to respond. Applicable reflection. You're perceiving all the time, but you only notice it when you stop. Do this every day, even if just for 5 minutes. When you talk to someone, don't focus only on what they say. Observe yourself. How does your chest feel, your stomach, your neck? Does your body expand or contract? That's the field speaking. Learn to listen to those micro-reactions without judging them, because what you feel is also information. And when you start to recognize those subtle messages, you'll be reading the body without touching it. Chapter 6. The sound that heals, frequency, breathing, silence. The first sound we remember doesn't come from outside, but from inside. It's the beat of our mother's heart, the rhythm of her breathing, the vibration of her voice, even before understanding words. That memory remains alive, even if no one tells us. I discovered it by accident in a room where Tibetan singing bowls were playing. I wasn't looking for anything deep, just a little calm. But something changed when certain notes touched my chest. A vibration without name, without clear emotion. Just a pulse, as if something inside responded. I started researching and found that sound isn't just art, it's pure physics. Researcher Hans Jenny, father of cymatics, demonstrated that sound can literally organize matter. When he placed sound frequencies on a plate with sand, the grains formed geometric, symmetrical, harmonic patterns. The same thing happens in our bodies. Every cell responds to a vibration. Every organ has its frequency. And when that frequency becomes unbalanced, the body speaks in the form of tension, inflammation, illness. Time later, in a meditation, I tried making a very simple sound with my own voice, just a sustained vowel. And I noticed something I had never felt. a kind of heat that moved from my throat to my chest. I wasn't singing, I was resonating. And that's when I understood what ancestral cultures have taught for centuries. Sound isn't heard, it's embodied. Mantras, shamanic chants, rhythmic prayers aren't superstition, they're intentional vibration. And breathing is also sound, also rhythm. Hair doesn't just oxygenate, it cleans, drags, carries, and when you combine it with attention, it becomes medicine. But perhaps the most powerful thing I learned was that silence also heals. True silence, not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that accompanies. That space without words where finally the body can hear itself. As Master Thich Nhat Hanh said, silence is not empty, it's full of answers. Internal resonance practice. Do this now or when you want to release tension. Close your eyes and place a hand on your chest. Breathe deeply through your nose, and as you exhale slowly, pronounce the letter A, sustained like a long whisper. Repeat that sound 3 times without thinking about the result, just feeling. Then stay in silence for a few seconds and listen to how your body feels. Do it every time your mind is overloaded or your body is restless. Sound aligns, silence reintegrates, and your voice can be your medicine. Chapter 7. When pain was inheritance, not illness. For years I believed that the pain I carried in my chest was mine because of poorly made decisions, because of words I didn't say, because of wounds I had caused myself. But over time I realized something that shook me. Not everything I felt belonged to me. It was an ancient anguish that didn't come from any clear memory or recent story. And one day, in the middle of a very quiet session with an older woman, she looked me in the eyes and told me bluntly, "That weight you have isn't yours. It's your mother's and perhaps also your grandmother's." I didn't know what to answer, but a part of my body relaxed as if finally someone had told the truth. Time later, I read about emotional inheritance and epigenetics. I discovered that unexpressed emotions, lived traumas and survival responses can leave biological marks that are transmitted between generations. Behavioral epigenetics, supported by scientists like Rachel Yehuda, shows that descendants of people who lived through traumatic events like the Holocaust or civil wars have a greater sensitivity to stress, even without having lived those events directly. It's not just genetics, it's emotional vibration, cellular memory. Then everything fit. My grandmother had been displaced in her youth. My mother lived with fear of uprooting, even though she never left her house. And I, for no apparent reason, had carried all my life an anxiety that didn't respond to anything logical. I began to feel that something inside me wasn't asking for an explanation. It was asking for recognition. And when I began to honor those stories, not with drama but with respect, something in my body began to let go. It was no longer a nameless pain. It was a story that deserved to be heard. I understood that the body sometimes doesn't ask for cure. It asks for memory, applicable reflection. There are pains that don't belong to you, but that inhabit you. Today, take a pause and ask yourself honestly, is this pain mine or am I holding it for someone I love? You don't need to have the complete answer. Just opening that space already begins the release process. And if you feel something moving, breathe and repeat to yourself, I can honor this story without carrying it anymore. Healing isn't always forgetting. Sometimes healing is remembering without repeating. Chapter 8. The day I got sick from not listening to my field. It wasn't sudden, it was little by little. Small warnings I ignored. Tiredness that didn't pass, pains that had no cause, sadness that wasn't mine. I kept attending to others, helping, containing, and I didn't realize that each encounter, each intense conversation, each heavy energy left something in me. I didn't know then that there was a difference between connecting and absorbing. I didn't connect, I merged with the other, and that began to take its toll. One night after an especially dense session, my body collapsed. Fever, pressure in my chest, exhaustion, and above all a strange sensation, as if something inside me had emptied. There was no clear medical cause, but I knew the body could no longer hold what wasn't its own. Then I remembered something I had read by Caroline Myss, Intuitive Doctor. When you help from a misaligned place, your body becomes a sponge and not a channel. And that was me, a sponge soaked with other people's emotions. I hadn't been compassionate. I had been negligent with myself. From that moment on, I began to change everything. Before each session, I closed my eyes, breathed deeply, and asked myself, am I available from peace or from exhaustion? If the answer was no, I opened that space, because I learned that true service isn't born from sacrifice, it's born from coherence. I began to protect my field, not as a shield, but as a temple that also needed rest. I cleaned my spaces with intention, released what wasn't mine after each encounter. And above all, I stopped feeling guilty for not being available all the time. I didn't get sick from helping. I got sick from not taking care of myself while helping. And that was one of the deepest learnings of this path. The body didn't fail me. The body warned me, and I didn't listen in time. Practical synthesis. Your energy isn't infinite, and you can't hold others if you're fallen. Do this before any emotionally charged encounter. Close your eyes. Breathe deeply 3 times and repeat to yourself in silence, I give myself permission to be present without absorbing what doesn't belong to me. And when you finish, do the same. But now repeat, I return with love what isn't mine, and I recover my center. Your energy field is your most sacred space, and if you don't take care of it, no one will do it for you. Chapter 9, I heal but I don't save. The trap of the energetic ego. At first, helping made me feel at peace, useful, connected. But over time, I began to notice that without realizing it, I expected something in return, not money or gratitude. I expected to be recognized as the one who helped, the one who knew, the one who healed. And when that didn't happen, I felt frustrated, even hurt. I didn't like to admit it, but that's how it was. It was in a conversation with a stranger, someone who came to one of my first group sessions. After the meeting, he looked at me and said with disarming honesty, I saw you very focused on saying deep things, but I didn't feel you present with me. I stayed silent, hurt, yes, but above all confronted. That phrase haunted me for weeks until I understood he was right. I had started this path from the heart, but little by little the character had taken over the channel. I wanted to help, yes, but I also wanted to do it well. I wanted to be effective, necessary, and behind all that was fear. Fear of not being enough, if I didn't manage to make the other feel better. There I remembered the words of Ram Dass. If you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family. And also this other more direct one. Helping from the ego is reinforcing the idea that you're fine and the other broken, and that's the opposite of healing. I then began to let go of that role, to enter each encounter as an equal, not as the guide but as the one who walks with. Sometimes that meant not saying anything, just being, looking, holding with the body, not with words. And every time I noticed that little inner voice that sought approval, I stopped. I breathed and remembered. I didn't come to save, I came to accompany. Because in the end, the true witch doesn't seek to be followed, seeks for the other to remember their own power. Applicable reflection. Observe yourself honestly. Are you helping to serve or to be needed? Are you sharing from the soul or from the character? Don't judge yourself for the answer. Just breathe and remind yourself this. I'm not the source, I'm just a channel. And the cleanest channel is the one that doesn't get in the way. When your vibration doesn't want to prove anything, that's when it can touch everything. Chapter 10. A single phrase and everything changed. It wasn't a session or a technique. It was a casual conversation, one of those where the other isn't looking for you to save them, just to listen. It was a friend of those who are always fine until they're not. That day he spoke like never before. Said he was tired, that he no longer believed in anything, that everything weighed on him, and at the end, he lowered his gaze, stayed quiet, waiting for something. I had many ideas in my head. I could remind him who he was, encourage him, offer him a solution. But something inside me asked for silence, and the only thing I said was, I believe you. It wasn't planned, it wasn't elegant. But at that moment his body collapsed, broke in a dry cry, not scandalous, not theatrical. A cry that came from a very ancient place, and there I knew, without doubt, that had been healing. Months later, in a book by Louis Cozzolino, neuroscientist and therapist, I read this. The human nervous system responds more deeply to emotional attunement than to logical content. It's not what you say. It's from where you say it. The tone, the breathing, the energetic intention, all that transmits more than words. And if there's coherence, the other's body captures it and opens. Since then, I learned to speak less and listen more. And when I speak, I no longer seek to say the right thing. I just wait to feel when the heart aligns with the word. Because if that happens, a single phrase can do what silence, explanation, or advice didn't. You won't always have the perfect word, but if you're in coherence, you won't need many. A single one can be everything. Practical synthesis. The next time someone tells you their pain, don't rush to respond. Just breathe, connect with yourself, and ask yourself, what needs to vibrate in this moment? Presence, silence, or a single real phrase. And if something wants to come out, don't think it. Say it from the chest, not from the head, because sometimes what heals isn't what you say, it's who you are when you say it. Chapter 11. The diary remains open. Now it's your turn. I didn't write this diary to teach or to convince. I wrote it because I didn't want to forget. Because every time I touched a body or a story, something inside me revealed itself and also transformed. And I needed to leave a record, not for others but for myself, to not fall into the trap of thinking this was a gift or an achieved goal. No, this was and continues to be a path that isn't walked in a straight line, that isn't always understood, that sometimes hurts more than it heals, but that when you honor it returns you to yourself, without masks, without titles, without role, just you vibrating with what is, not with what you thought should be. Every time someone calls me a witch, I smile inside, because it no longer weighs on me or defines me. I understand it's just a word trying to say something more difficult, someone who remembers, someone who doesn't cure, but accompanies healing. I don't have techniques to give you or infallible formulas. I have stories, I have signs, I have what I've lived, and that sometimes is enough to ignite something in the other. This diary doesn't close today, it just changes hands. Now it's in yours. Practical invitation. Write your own entry. If something you heard here resonated with you, take a paper today, not tomorrow, and write your own first entry. You don't need to know anything. Just answer honestly, what has my body tried to teach me lately and I haven't wanted to listen? Write it as if no one were going to read it, as if only your energy understood it. That's already starting. You don't need to call yourself a witch, you just need to be available to listen, to remember, to vibrate differently. The rest comes on its own. If this journey has touched something deep within you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to the channel so you can continue exploring these paths of healing, consciousness, and authentic presence. Each video is an invitation to remember who you truly are, beyond the noise. Join this community of souls who are learning to listen to their bodies, honor their stories, and vibrate from a place of truth. Hit that subscribe button, and let's continue walking this path together.